On the morning of October 12, 1966, 12 loggers entered the dense forests of the Bitterroot Mountains in western Montana. By afternoon, 6 of them would be dead, crushed beneath thousands of pounds of falling timber in what would become one of the deadliest logging accidents in Montana's history. 6 families would lose their fathers, brothers, and sons. 6 men who had awakened that morning to the smell of coffee and the promise of another day's work would never return home. The tragedy that claimed these lives would expose deadly flaws in logging practices and forever change how timber operations prioritize worker safety. If you want to understand how this preventable disaster claimed 6 lives and transformed an entire industry, subscribe to this channel. This episode is a fictionalized reconstruction inspired by real logging accidents and workplace safety investigations from the period. Names, locations, and specific events have been created for storytelling purposes. The Bitterroot Mountains stretch across the border between Montana and Idaho, their peaks rising like jagged teeth against the October sky. In 1966, these mountains hold some of the finest timber in the American West, towering ponderosa pines and Douglas firs that have stood for centuries. The air at 7,000 feet carries the sharp scent of pine resin and the earthy smell of fallen leaves beginning their slow decay. Temperatures hover near freezing in the early morning, warming to a crisp 45 degrees by midday. The sound of chainsaws echoes through the valleys, mixing with the crash of falling trees and the rumble of logging trucks navigating narrow mountain roads. This is the domain of Cascade Timber Company, one of Montana's largest logging operations. The company employs over 300 men across a dozen active sites, cutting timber that feeds sawmills from Missoula to Spokane. The work is dangerous by nature, but it provides good wages for men willing to risk their lives among the giants of the forest. Most loggers come from families that have worked these mountains for generations, passing down knowledge of the woods alongside warnings about the 1,000 ways a tree can kill a man. The Bitterroot site, designated as Camp 7, sits 15 miles from the nearest paved road. Workers reach the cutting area via a winding dirt track that climbs steadily through dense forest. The logging operation here focuses on selective harvesting, taking the largest and most valuable trees while leaving smaller ones to continue growing. This approach requires skilled crews who can assess each tree individually, determining the safest direction for it to fall while avoiding damage to surrounding timber. The terrain at Camp 7 presents unique challenges. The cutting area spans a steep hillside where trees grow at various angles, some leaning downhill, others twisted by decades of wind and weather. Rocky outcroppings jut through the forest floor, creating obstacles that complicate the path of falling trees. A small creek runs through the lower portion of the site, its banks lined with particularly large trees that have thrived in the moist soil. The combination of steep terrain, valuable timber, and difficult working conditions makes Camp 7 both profitable and perilous. Cascade Timber Company began operations in the Bitterroot Mountains in 1952, capitalizing on the post-war construction boom that created unprecedented demand for lumber. The company's founder, William Hartley, built his business on aggressive harvesting schedules and competitive pricing. Safety protocols at Cascade follow industry standards of the era, which emphasize production efficiency over worker protection. Hard hats are required, but safety training consists primarily of experienced workers teaching newcomers through demonstration and warning. The company's safety record reflects the inherent dangers of logging work. Between 1960 and 1965, Cascade experienced 47 workplace injuries requiring medical attention, including 3 fatalities. 2 men died from falling trees, while a third was killed when a cable snapped during a loading operation. These incidents prompted minor changes to procedures, but the fundamental approach to logging remained unchanged. Speed and volume drive profitability, and safety measures that slow production face resistance from supervisors under pressure to meet quotas. Federal oversight of logging operations in 1966 remains minimal. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration does not yet exist, leaving workplace safety largely to state authorities and industry self-regulation. Montana's Department of Labor maintains basic safety requirements for logging operations, but inspections are infrequent and penalties for violations are modest. Most safety protocols develop through trial and error within individual companies, with successful practices spreading slowly through an industry that values tradition and experience over formal training. Cascade Timber's approach to tree felling follows conventional wisdom of the era. Crews work in teams of 4 to 6 men, with each team responsible for a designated section of forest. The most experienced worker serves as the faller, the man who makes the critical cuts that determine where and how a tree falls. Other team members clear brush, operate equipment, and ensure the falling tree's path remains clear of obstacles and personnel. Communication relies on hand signals and shouted warnings, as the noise of chainsaws makes normal conversation impossible. Equipment at Camp 7 represents standard logging technology of the mid-1960s. Chainsaws are heavy, two-man affairs that require considerable strength to operate effectively. Cables and winches help control the direction of falling trees, but these systems often prove inadequate for the massive timber common in the Bitterroots. Safety equipment consists of hard hats, work boots with caulked soles for traction on logs, and heavy clothing to protect against cuts and abrasions. No one wears safety harnesses or carries communication devices, as such equipment remains uncommon in the logging industry. The men who would die at Camp 7 on October 12 represent the backbone of Montana's logging workforce. Robert Chun, 42 years old and a 15-year veteran of the timber industry, serves as the crew's lead faller. Chun learned logging from his father, who worked these same mountains in the 1930s. Known for his careful approach to dangerous trees, Chun has never suffered a serious injury despite working some of the most challenging sites in the region. He leaves behind a wife and 2 teenage children. Maria Santos, 28, recently earned promotion to equipment operator after 3 years as a general laborer. Santos operates the winch system that helps control falling trees, a position requiring precise timing and constant communication with the faller. She is one of only a handful of women working in Montana's logging industry, having fought for the opportunity to prove herself in a traditionally male occupation. Santos supports her elderly parents and a younger brother attending college. James Mitchell, 35, works as the crew's safety coordinator, responsible for ensuring clear escape routes and warning of potential hazards. Mitchell served 2 tours in Vietnam before returning to his hometown and finding work in the woods. His military experience taught him to assess dangerous situations quickly, skills that prove valuable in the unpredictable environment of logging operations. Mitchell is engaged to be married in the spring. Thomas Anderson, 51, represents the old guard of Montana logging. Anderson has worked in the timber industry for over 30 years, beginning as a teenager during the final years of the Great Depression. His knowledge of tree behavior and forest conditions makes him invaluable for assessing difficult cutting situations. Anderson planned to retire within 2 years, having saved enough money to purchase a small ranch near Missoula. David Kim, 24, is the newest member of the crew, having joined Cascade Timber just 6 months earlier. Kim moved to Montana from California, drawn by the promise of steady work and good wages in the timber industry. He works as a choker setter, the dangerous job of attaching cables to logs for transport. Despite his relative inexperience, Kim demonstrates natural ability and earns respect from veteran loggers. Frank Rodriguez, 47, operates the crew's primary chainsaw, working in partnership with Chun to fell the largest trees. Rodriguez has worked logging operations across the Pacific Northwest, gaining experience with various cutting techniques and challenging terrain. Known for his strength and endurance, Rodriguez can work long hours in difficult conditions without showing fatigue. He sends most of his earnings to support his extended family in New Mexico. The morning of October 12th begins like countless others at Camp 7. Workers arrive at the site before dawn, their headlamps cutting through the darkness as they prepare equipment and review the day's cutting plan. The temperature hovers at 28 degrees, cold enough to form frost on metal surfaces, but not severe enough to delay operations. The forecast calls for clear skies and moderate winds, ideal conditions for tree felling operations. Chun examines the trees designated for cutting, massive Douglas firs that tower nearly 200 feet above the forest floor. Several of these giants show signs of stress, including dead branches near their crowns and slight liens that complicate the falling process. The largest tree, designated as number 47 on the cutting map, stands nearly 8 feet in diameter at its base and leans slightly downhill toward the creek. This tree alone contains enough lumber to frame several houses, making it a valuable target despite the challenges it presents. The crew begins work at 7 in the morning, starting with smaller trees to warm up their equipment and establish a rhythm for the day. Rodriguez fires up the primary chainsaw, its two-stroke engine settling into the steady roar that will dominate the soundscape for the next 8 hours. Santos checks the winch system, ensuring cables move smoothly through their guides and testing the brakes that control the descent of falling trees. Mitchell walks the cutting area, identifying potential hazards and marking escape routes with bright orange flags. By mid-morning, the crew has successfully felled 6 trees without incident. The fallen timber lies scattered across the hillside, awaiting processing by the bucking crew that will arrive later in the week. Each tree falls according to plan, crashing to the ground with tremendous force that shakes the earth and sends small animals fleeing through the underbrush. The work proceeds smoothly, with experienced hands performing tasks they have repeated thousands of times before. The first signs of trouble emerge around 10:30, when Shin notices unusual stress patterns in tree number 47. The massive Douglas fir shows evidence of internal decay, visible through gaps in its bark where insects have burrowed deep into the heartwood. This decay weakens the tree's structural integrity, making its behavior during cutting unpredictable. Shin calls for a brief conference with his team, discussing options for safely felling the compromised tree. Standard procedure requires extreme caution when cutting trees with suspected internal damage. The decay can create weak points that cause the tree to split or fall in unexpected directions, potentially crushing anyone in its path. Shin considers abandoning the tree entirely, leaving it standing for future assessment with specialized equipment. However, the tree's size and value make this option unappealing to supervisors who emphasize meeting daily quotas. After 20 minutes of discussion, the crew decides to proceed with cutting tree 47, implementing additional safety measures to account for its compromised condition. Santos positions the winch system to provide maximum control over the tree's falling direction, running cables high up the trunk to influence its descent. Mitchell expands the danger zone around the tree, marking a wider area that all personnel must evacuate before cutting begins. Rodriguez sharpens his chainsaw blade to ensure clean cuts that minimize stress on the weakened wood. The cutting process for tree 47 begins at 11:15. Rodriguez makes the initial face cut, a precise notch that determines the direction of the tree's fall. The chainsaw bites through the outer bark and into the solid wood beneath, sending a shower of sawdust cascading to the forest floor. The cut reveals the extent of the internal decay, dark streaks of rotted wood that penetrate deep into the tree's core. The damage appears more extensive than visible from the outside, raising additional concerns about the tree's stability. Shin calls for a second assessment, examining the face cut to determine whether the tree can be safely felled. The decay follows an irregular pattern, creating weak spots that could cause the tree to break apart during its fall. Despite these concerns, the crew decides to continue, believing their experience and safety measures will prevent disaster. This decision will prove fatal for 6 men. Rodriguez begins the back cut at 11:45, working slowly to maintain control over the massive tree. The chainsaw struggles through the dense wood, its engine laboring under the load. Sawdust mixed with rotted wood pours from the cut, creating a growing pile at Rodriguez's feet. Santos maintains tension on the winch cables, ready to guide the tree's fall away from the cutting crew. Mitchell monitors the tree's crown for signs of movement, watching for the subtle shift that indicates the beginning of its fall. The first indication of catastrophic failure comes at 11:52, when Rodriguez's chainsaw encounters a large pocket of decay near the center of the tree. The rotted wood offers no resistance to the blade, causing the saw to lurch forward unexpectedly. This sudden movement creates an uneven cut that destabilizes the tree's remaining support structure. The massive Douglas fir begins to lean, but not in the intended direction. Instead of falling downhill toward the designated landing area, tree 47 tilts backward toward the cutting crew. The internal decay has created a hinge point different from what Shin calculated, causing the tree to rotate around an axis of solid wood located higher than anticipated. Santos immediately releases tension on the winch cables, but the tree's enormous mass overwhelms the system's ability to influence its direction. Chun shouts a warning, his voice barely audible over the sound of cracking wood and the chainsaw's roar. The crew has precious seconds to escape the tree's falling path, but the steep terrain and scattered equipment impede their movement. Rodriguez attempts to shut off his chainsaw while running uphill, but stumbles over a fallen branch and loses valuable time. Santos abandons the winch controls and sprints toward the nearest escape route, marked by one of Mitchell's orange flags. The tree's fall accelerates as more of its support structure fails. 200 feet of Douglas fir, weighing an estimated 40 tons, crashes through the forest canopy with the sound of thunder. Smaller trees snap like twigs under its weight, and the impact sends a shockwave through the ground that can be felt a quarter-mile away. The massive trunk strikes the earth with enough force to create a crater 3 feet deep, but its path of destruction extends far beyond the point of impact. As Tree 47 falls, its immense weight causes it to break apart at the weakened sections identified during cutting. The tree splits into 3 major pieces, each weighing several tons and following a different trajectory. The largest section, comprising the tree's base and lower trunk, falls roughly as intended, crashing into the designated landing area. However, the middle section breaks free and tumbles down the hillside, while the crown portion snaps off and falls backward toward the cutting crew. Rodriguez dies instantly when the middle section of the tree strikes him as he attempts to flee uphill. The massive log crushes his chest and abdomen, killing him before he can cry out. His chainsaw continues running for several seconds after his death, its blade spinning uselessly in the sawdust until the engine finally stalls. Santos nearly reaches safety when the tree's crown section crashes through the forest above her position. A large branch, itself weighing over a ton, breaks free from the main crown and strikes her from behind. The impact drives her to the ground and crushes her spine, causing death within minutes from massive internal injuries. Mitchell dies while attempting to warn other crew members of the tree's unexpected fall direction. Standing near his orange safety flag, he waves frantically to alert workers in the danger zone when the tree's crown section lands directly on top of him. The impact is so severe that his body is not immediately visible beneath the tangle of branches and debris. Kim perishes while running toward what he believes is a safe area marked by Mitchell's flags. The falling crown section creates a cascade of debris that includes broken branches, chunks of bark, and pieces of other trees damaged in the collapse. A section of trunk weighing nearly 3 tons strikes Kim as he attempts to take shelter behind a standing tree, crushing him against the solid wood. Chun and Anderson die together when they become trapped between the falling crown section and a rocky outcropping. Both men recognize the danger and run toward what appears to be a protected area behind the rocks. However, the tree's crown section is so large that it extends beyond the outcropping, pinning both men against the stone. They survive the initial impact but succumb to their injuries within an hour, unable to free themselves from beneath the massive debris. The remaining 6 crew members survive by reaching genuine safety zones or by sheer luck. 2 men working on the far side of the cutting area escape injury entirely, while 4 others suffer minor cuts and bruises from flying debris. The survivors immediately begin rescue efforts, but the scale of the destruction makes it clear that help will be needed from outside the logging crew. The first emergency call reaches the Ravalli County Sheriff's Department at 12:15, 23 minutes after the tree's fatal collapse. The caller, crew supervisor William Hayes, reports multiple casualties and requests immediate medical assistance and heavy equipment to move the fallen timber. However, the remote location of Camp 7 complicates rescue efforts, as emergency vehicles must navigate 15 miles of narrow mountain roads to reach the site. The initial response team includes 2 ambulances from Missoula, a helicopter from the Montana National Guard, and a crew of volunteer firefighters trained in wilderness rescue. The helicopter arrives first, landing in a small clearing nearly half a mile from the accident site. Paramedics must hike through dense forest carrying medical equipment, reaching the victims 45 minutes after the initial emergency call. The scene that greets rescue workers defies easy description. The massive Douglas fir has created a debris field covering nearly 2 acres, with broken trees and scattered equipment marking the path of destruction. The tree's various sections lie at different angles, some partially buried in the soft forest soil, others balanced precariously against standing trees. The 6 victims remained trapped beneath different portions of the fallen timber, requiring heavy equipment to access their bodies. Recovery efforts continue throughout the afternoon and into the evening. A logging crane arrives from Missoula at 4 o'clock, followed by additional heavy equipment capable of moving the massive tree sections. Workers proceed carefully, aware that shifting the debris could cause additional collapses that might injure rescue personnel. The last victim is recovered at 8:30 in the evening, nearly 9 hours after the fatal accident. Rodriguez's body is recovered first, found beneath the middle section of the tree where he fell while attempting to flee. Santos is located an hour later, partially buried under branches from the tree's crown section. Mitchell's remains are discovered near his safety flag, crushed beneath a portion of the main trunk. Kim is found in what appeared to be a safe area, killed by debris that traveled much farther than anyone anticipated. Chun and Anderson are the last victims recovered, their bodies pinned between the crown section and the rocky outcropping where they sought shelter. The 6 men died from what the county coroner later classifies as massive blunt force trauma, caused by the enormous weight of falling timber. Rodriguez and Santos died instantly from crushing injuries to vital organs. Mitchell succumbed to severe head trauma when struck by the main trunk section. Kim suffered fatal chest injuries from impact with debris. Chun and Anderson died from compression injuries after being pinned beneath the tree's crown, surviving the initial impact but unable to escape before their injuries proved fatal. The investigation into the Camp 7 tragedy begins within hours of the accident, led by Montana's Department of Labor in cooperation with federal forestry officials. Investigators faced the challenging task of reconstructing events that occurred in seconds, using physical evidence from a debris field that has been disturbed by rescue operations. The investigation team includes safety engineers, forestry experts, and specialists in accident reconstruction. Preliminary findings focus on the condition of Tree 47 and the crew's decision to proceed with cutting despite visible signs of internal decay. Investigators discover that the tree's rot extended much deeper into its core than visible from external examination. Laboratory analysis of wood samples reveals that insects and fungal infection had compromised nearly 60% of the tree's structural integrity, creating weak points that made its behavior during felling unpredictable. The investigation also examines Cascade Timber Company's safety protocols and training procedures. Investigators find that while the company met minimum state requirements for safety equipment and procedures, its emphasis on production quotas created pressure to take risks that might otherwise be avoided. The company's safety training program relied heavily on informal mentorship rather than structured education about recognizing and managing hazards. Federal investigators analyzed the industry's approach to cutting diseased or damaged trees, finding that standard procedures of the era provided insufficient guidance for assessing internal decay. The techniques used by Chun and his crew represented accepted practice within the logging industry, but investigators conclude that these methods proved inadequate for dealing with severely compromised timber. The investigation reveals that warning signs of the tree's instability were present but not properly interpreted by the cutting crew. Stress patterns visible in the bark, the extent of insect damage, and the tree's slight lean all indicated potential problems. However, the crew lacked training in advanced hazard assessment techniques that might have revealed the full extent of the internal decay. Investigators also examined the effectiveness of the crew's safety measures, including the winch system intended to control the tree's fall direction. They find that while the equipment functioned as designed, it was inadequate for managing a tree of 47 size and compromised condition. The winch system could influence the direction of a healthy tree's fall, but lacked the power to overcome the structural failures that caused the Douglas fir to break apart. The investigation's final report, released 6 months after the accident, identifies multiple contributing factors to the 6 fatalities. Primary responsibility lies with the decision to cut a severely compromised tree using standard techniques inappropriate for its condition. The report also cites inadequate safety training, insufficient hazard assessment procedures, and the absence of specialized equipment for dealing with diseased timber. Investigators conclude that the deaths could have been prevented through better recognition of the tree's condition and implementation of alternative cutting techniques. The report recommends mandatory training and hazard assessment, development of specialized procedures for compromised trees, and improved safety equipment for logging operations. These recommendations will eventually become standard practice throughout the industry. The legal aftermath of the Camp 7 tragedy unfolds over several years, as families of the 6 victims pursue wrongful death lawsuits against Cascade Timber Company. The lawsuits allege that the company's emphasis on production over safety created conditions that led to the fatal accident. Attorneys for the families argue that proper training and equipment could have prevented the deaths, making the company liable for negligence. Cascade Timber Company's legal defense centers on the argument that logging is an inherently dangerous occupation where accidents are unavoidable despite reasonable safety precautions. The company's attorneys contend that Chun and his crew followed accepted industry practices and that the tree's internal condition could not have been detected using available assessment techniques. The wrongful death cases result in a settlement totaling $1.2 million, distributed among the families of the 6 victims. While the settlement does not constitute an admission of guilt by Cascade Timber Company, it provides financial support for the families who lost their primary breadwinners. The settlement also includes provisions for improved safety training and equipment at all Cascade operations. Criminal charges are never filed in connection with the 6 deaths, as prosecutors determine that while safety violations may have occurred, they do not rise to the level of criminal negligence. This decision frustrates some family members who believe that individuals should be held personally accountable for the safety failures that caused the tragedy. The regulatory response to the Camp 7 accident includes new state requirements for logging operations in Montana. These regulations mandate specialized training for cutting diseased or damaged trees, require additional safety equipment for high-risk operations, and establish more stringent inspection procedures for logging sites. The regulations also create penalties for companies that prioritize production quotas over worker safety. The tragedy at Camp 7 contributes to growing national awareness of workplace safety issues that will eventually lead to the creation of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration in 1970. The 6 deaths become part of the statistical evidence used to justify federal intervention in workplace safety, demonstrating the need for standardized protection for American workers. The logging industry's response to the Camp 7 tragedy varies significantly among different companies and regions. Progressive operators implement enhanced safety training and invest in improved equipment for hazard assessment. However, many smaller operations resist changes that increase costs or slow production, arguing that experienced loggers can manage risks through traditional methods. The development of new technology for assessing tree condition becomes a priority following the investigation's findings. Researchers develop portable equipment that can detect internal decay without requiring destructive testing. These tools, including sonic testing devices and resistance drills, become standard equipment for logging operations dealing with potentially compromised timber. Training programs for logging crews evolved significantly in the years following Camp 7. The informal mentorship system that dominated the industry gives way to structured education programs that teach hazard recognition and risk assessment. These programs emphasize the importance of abandoning dangerous trees rather than attempting to cut them using inadequate techniques. The 6 men who died at Camp 7 are memorialized through several initiatives within Montana's logging community. A scholarship fund established in their honor provides education assistance for children of logging families, helping them pursue careers in forestry, safety engineering, or related fields. The fund ensures that the victims' sacrifice contributes to improving conditions for future generations of timber workers. A memorial plaque installed at the entrance to the Bitterroot National Forest commemorates Rodriguez, Santos, Mitchell, Kim, Chun, and Anderson, acknowledging their contribution to the logging industry and the lessons learned from their deaths. The memorial serves as a reminder to current workers of the importance of safety in an occupation where momentary lapses in judgment can prove fatal. The site of the Camp 7 accident remains largely undisturbed, with the fallen Douglas fir left in place as part of the forest's natural cycle. Over the decades, the massive trunk has become a nurse log, supporting new growth that will eventually become the next generation of forest giants. This natural process provides a fitting tribute to the 6 men whose deaths helped improve safety for countless others. The long-term impact of the Camp 7 tragedy extends far beyond the immediate changes in logging practices. The accident demonstrates the importance of questioning traditional methods when faced with unusual conditions, even when those methods have proven successful in the past. The 6 deaths illustrate how rapidly a routine operation can become fatal when multiple risk factors combine in unexpected ways. The tragedy also highlights the human cost of industrial accidents, reminding safety professionals that statistics represent real people with families and futures cut short. The deaths of Rodriguez, Santos, Mitchell, Kim, Chun, and Anderson provide powerful motivation for continued improvements in workplace safety, ensuring that their sacrifice contributes to protecting others who follow in their footsteps. Modern logging operations bear little resemblance to the practices that led to the Camp 7 disaster. Advanced equipment allows for remote cutting of dangerous trees, while sophisticated assessment tools reveal internal damage that would have been invisible to 1966 technology. Safety training now emphasizes systematic hazard analysis over reliance on experience and intuition. The regulatory framework governing logging safety has evolved dramatically since 1966, with federal oversight complementing state regulations to ensure consistent protection for workers across the industry. The penalties for safety violations have increased substantially, creating strong financial incentives for companies to prioritize worker protection over production speed. Despite these improvements, logging remains one of America's most dangerous occupations, with fatality rates far exceeding the national average for all industries. The lessons learned from tragedies like Camp 7 continue to inform safety practices, but the fundamental challenge of working among massive trees in challenging terrain ensures that vigilance remains essential. The 6 deaths at Camp 7 serve as a sobering reminder that safety is not a destination, but a continuous journey requiring constant attention and improvement. Each advance in technology, training, or regulation represents progress built upon the sacrifice of workers who died in preventable accidents. Their legacy lies not in the manner of their deaths, but in the lives saved through the lessons learned from their tragedy. The story of the Camp 7 disaster illustrates how quickly workplace complacency can turn fatal and why questioning established practices remains essential for worker safety. 6 experienced loggers died not because they lacked skill or courage, but because they faced a situation that exceeded the capabilities of their training and equipment. Their deaths remind us that experience alone cannot overcome systemic safety deficiencies and that protecting workers requires ongoing investment in better methods, tools, and training. If this story about preventable tragedy and lost lives gave you insight into why safety matters, leave your like and share with others who appreciate learning from fatal accidents so others might live. The technical analysis conducted by federal investigators reveals critical flaws in the assessment methodology used by Chin's crew on the morning of October 12. Standard practice in 1966 involves visual inspection of bark patterns, percussion testing using hammers to detect hollow sounds indicating decay, and examination of the tree's lean angle using basic surveying tools. However, these techniques prove inadequate for detecting the extensive internal rot that compromises tree 47's structural integrity. Laboratory examination of wood samples collected from the fallen Douglas fir shows that fungal infection penetrated the heartwood through multiple entry points created by bark beetle infestations occurring over several years. The decay follows the tree's growth rings, creating concentric zones of weakness that are invisible from external inspection. Microscopic analysis reveals that the remaining sound wood comprises only 38% of the tree's cross-sectional area at the cutting height, far below the minimum 50% required for safe felling using conventional techniques. The investigation team reconstructs the exact sequence of structural failures that caused the tree to break apart during its fall. High-speed photography of similar controlled felling operations shows that trees typically maintain their structural integrity until impact with the ground. However, tree 47 begins separating into sections while still falling, indicating that the cutting process itself triggers catastrophic failure of the weakened wood fibers. Computer modeling conducted by forestry engineers demonstrates that the tree's internal decay created multiple stress concentration points that could not withstand the dynamic forces generated during felling. The model shows that even perfect cutting technique could not have prevented the breakup, as the tree's compromised structure made safe felling impossible using any equipment available in 1966. The investigation expands to examine similar accidents throughout the Pacific Northwest, revealing that falling timber kills an average of 43 loggers annually across Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. Of these fatalities, investigators determined that approximately 30% involved trees with significant internal decay that was not properly assessed before cutting. This pattern suggests that the Camp 7 tragedy represents a systemic problem rather than an isolated incident. Regulatory analysis reveals significant gaps in existing safety standards that contribute to the high fatality rate in logging operations. Montana's workplace safety regulations in 1966 require hard hats and basic safety training, but provide no specific guidance for dealing with diseased or damaged trees. The regulations assume that experienced loggers can assess tree condition using traditional methods, an assumption that proves fatally flawed in cases involving extensive internal decay. Federal forestry officials examine cutting practices on public lands, finding that government operations follow essentially the same procedures as private companies like Cascade Timber. The U.S. Forest Service maintains more detailed records of tree condition and cutting operations, but these records focus on timber volume and quality rather than safety considerations. The agency's safety protocols emphasize general precautions rather than specific techniques for managing high-risk trees. The investigation team interviews logging supervisors and experienced fallers from operations throughout the region, gathering information about traditional methods for assessing tree condition. These interviews reveal wide variation in practices, with some crews relying primarily on visual inspection, while others employ more sophisticated testing techniques. However, none of the methods in common use prove adequate for detecting the type of extensive internal decay found in Tree 47. Insurance industry analysis of logging accidents provides additional insight into the factors contributing to fatalities. Insurance companies report that falling tree accidents account for 62% of all logging fatalities, with most incidents involving trees that behave unexpectedly during felling. The insurance data shows that crew experience has little correlation with accident rates, suggesting that traditional training methods fail to address the most dangerous situations. The economic impact of the Camp 7 tragedy extends beyond the immediate costs of the accident and subsequent legal settlements. Cascade Timber Company faces increased insurance premiums, regulatory scrutiny, and difficulty recruiting experienced workers following the highly publicized deaths. The company's production declines significantly as crews adopt more cautious approaches to tree felling, taking additional time to assess potentially dangerous trees. Industry-wide changes begin emerging within months of the accident, as logging companies throughout the region implement enhanced safety measures to avoid similar tragedies. These changes include mandatory training programs focusing on hazard recognition, investment in new equipment for assessing tree condition, and revised cutting procedures that emphasize abandoning questionable trees rather than attempting to fell them. The development of sonic testing equipment accelerates following the Camp 7 investigation, as manufacturers recognize the market demand for tools that can detect internal decay. These devices use sound waves to map the internal structure of standing trees, revealing areas of weakness that are invisible to visual inspection. Early versions of this equipment become available in 1968, though widespread adoption requires several more years. Training program development becomes a priority for both government agencies and private companies seeking to prevent future fatalities. The University of Montana establishes a specialized forestry safety program that includes extensive instruction in tree assessment techniques and hazard recognition. This program becomes a model for similar initiatives at forestry schools throughout the Pacific Northwest. The psychological impact of the Camp 7 tragedy affects the entire logging community in western Montana. Many experienced loggers report increased anxiety when working with large or potentially compromised trees, leading to more conservative cutting decisions that prioritize safety over production speed. While this cautious approach reduces accident rates, it also decreases productivity and increases costs for logging operations. Labor union involvement in safety issues increases significantly following the 6 deaths at Camp 7. The International Woodworkers of America uses the tragedy to advocate for stronger safety regulations and better training programs for logging crews. The union argues that workers should not be required to risk their lives to meet production quotas, leading to negotiations that establish safety committees at major logging operations. Research into alternative cutting techniques gains momentum as the industry seeks methods for safely dealing with diseased or damaged trees. Experimental approaches include remote-controlled cutting equipment, controlled explosive techniques for bringing down dangerous trees, and chemical treatment methods for strengthening compromised wood fibers. While most of these approaches prove impractical for routine operations, they contribute to the development of specialized techniques for high-risk situations. The Camp 7 accident influences safety culture throughout the logging industry, challenging the traditional emphasis on courage and risk-taking that characterized timber work for generations. The 6 deaths demonstrate that bravery alone cannot overcome inadequate safety procedures, leading to greater acceptance of systematic approaches to hazard management. Long-term follow-up studies track the effectiveness of safety improvements implemented following the tragedy. Data collected over the subsequent decade shows a 37% reduction in fatalities from falling trees among logging operations that adopt enhanced assessment techniques and specialized training programs. This statistical evidence validates the investigation's recommendations and provides justification for continued investment in safety improvements. The families of the 6 victims become advocates for logging safety, working with government agencies and industry organizations to promote awareness of workplace hazards. Their efforts contribute to the establishment of annual safety conferences that bring together loggers, supervisors, and safety professionals to share information about preventing accidents and protecting workers. The Camp 7 Memorial Scholarship Fund grows to support not only education for logging families, but also research into forestry safety techniques. Recipients of these scholarships often pursue careers in safety engineering or forestry management, ensuring that the victim's legacy continues to influence industry practices for generations to come. The fund demonstrates how tragedy can be transformed into positive change that protects future workers from similar fates.